That's how Dorinda Yancey introduced herself to me. Not with a hello, not with a handshake, just a clipboard, a clicking pen, and that tight little smile people get when they've been bossing folks around so long they forget somebody might laugh in their face. I didn't sign it. I just stood there on my porch in the Texas heat, looking at her white Escalade, that proud little board president magnet on the door, and thinking, well, here comes trouble. My name's Garrett Wolfson. I'm 58 years old. I've got 40 years of diesel grease worked so deep into the knuckles of my right hand it may outlive me, and I own 34 acres on the western edge of Calderwood Pines, Texas. Own present tense. My grandfather cleared that land in 1951 with hand tools, mule strength, and the kind of stubbornness families like mine pass down more faithfully than money. He drove iron survey pins into the corners himself, filed the deed with the county, and left us one simple thing that never changed. This land was ours. My father ran cattle and hay on it until he died in 2009. I inherited it clean, no mortgage, no liens, no easements, nothing fancy, just a hand-typed deed, so old it crackles when you unfold it, and 4 iron pins still sitting where my grandfather put them. That should have been the end of the story. It wasn't. Calderwood Pines came later, 12 years ago, when a developer carved up the neighboring acreage into neat little lots with HOA rules, monthly dues, architectural committees, newsletters, all the machinery of organized suburban control. Nice neighborhood, mostly decent people. But I never bought into it, never signed their paperwork, never agreed to live under a board's permission slip version of reality. My ranch land just happened to sit beside theirs like an old boot at a country club. That arrangement worked fine until Dorinda got elected board president. Dorinda was 54, a former real estate paralegal, and the kind of woman who treated an HOA like a small kingdom she'd been born to rule. Certified letters flew out of her office like confetti. Every page smelled faintly of toner, hairspray, and confidence. The first time she came out, she informed me, informed not asked, that the low southeastern corner of my property was actually a community drainage easement. She handed me a paper with stamps on it, the kind of document that looks official if you don't read too closely. I read it. 4 seconds, maybe 5. Then I handed it back and told her, polite as church, that my grandfather's deed included that section with 0 easements attached, and she ought to have her lawyer check county records before driving back out here again. She smiled, wrote something on her clipboard, and left. 3 weeks later, 2 excavators were parked on that same corner of my land at 7 in the morning, engines idling low enough to rattle your teeth. The foreman, Bryce, was sunburned, polite, and carrying stamped engineering plans for a community pool. He genuinely thought everything was legal. I could see it in the way he laid those papers out on the hood of his truck, like a man showing you a grocery list, not a theft. I asked him one question. Did anybody actually pull the deed for this parcel before you broke ground? He blinked once and said, that's not really my department. No, it wasn't. Bryce was a working man doing a working man's job. My issue wasn't with him. My issue was with whoever fed him a lie and called it paperwork. So I did what I've spent my whole life doing. When something sounds wrong inside the machine, I got still and I started paying attention. I called my cousin Harland, who spent 40 years doing title work and could pull a property chain faster than most men could recite their own birthdays. I gave him everything, my deed, the permit number, Dorinda's easement claim. 20 minutes later, he called back and said, buddy, they built on your land. Full stop. Turned out the permit application had a transposed parcel number, just 2 digits switched. Sounds small, right? But in property law, 2 wrong digits can move a line 90 feet. And 90 feet was exactly enough to shift the pool project off HOA, common area, and squarely onto my southeastern corner. The county had approved a permit built on a fake description, which meant the permit wasn't weak, it was void. Now, some people hear that and want to drive straight to the fence line and start hollering. I get it, I really do. But years as a mechanic teach you something yelling never will. Don't tear the engine apart before you've documented the failure. Once people know they're caught, evidence starts disappearing. So I documented everything. I borrowed a trail camera from my neighbor Cliff and mounted it where it could see the whole site. I walked the fence line with my phone, recording every stake, every trench, every machine, narrating in the slow, boring voice that wins court cases. Then I went to my barn, opened the fireproof lockbox under my workbench, and pulled out the old papers. The barn smelled like motor oil, dust, old leather, and history. My grandfather's deed was there. My father's probate records. A 1962 survey drawn in India ink on linen paper faded the color of weak tea. In the margin next to the southeast corner were my grandfather's initials EW. I just sat there with that survey in my hands for a minute. There's a feeling you get when dead family members seem to reach through paper and remind you not to act scared on land they bled for. I sent Dorinda a certified letter. Calm, factual, no threats. Construction had commenced on my private property without consent. The encroachment had been documented, and I was demanding an immediate halt pending title review. Copies went to the county commissioner's office and the Attorney General's Consumer Division. 3 days later, her lawyer answered with 8 pages of legal fog. Their argument was that my land was subject to an implied easement by prior use because rainwater had historically crossed that low corner. According to them, this somehow justified building a $200,000 swimming pool in my drainage path. That was when I called Vera Ashcraft. Vera was 5'4", drove a pickup older than half the lawyers in Texas, and had the courtroom manner of a woman who considered nonsense a personal insult. She read everything, then called me back with that dangerous, quiet, smart people get when they've just found the weak spot in the wall. "Garrett," she said, "their argument is ridiculous. And I don't think ridiculous is the worst thing they've done." She was right. Dorinda didn't stop construction. She accelerated it. By June, the pool was finished. Blue-green water, pergola lights, ribbon-cutting ceremony, giant scissors, HOA newsletter photos. Dorinda grinning like she'd built Rome with her bare hands. Then 2 weeks later, I got a bill. They built a pool on my land, and then billed me $1,847 for my proportionate share of the maintenance assessment, claiming I was an adjacent owner benefiting from community infrastructure. I read that sentence 3 times because I wanted to make sure I wasn't having a stroke. Vera called back in under an hour after reviewing it. The provision they quoted requires written consent from the adjacent owner, she said. Your signature, which they never got. Garrett, this isn't just wrong, it's fraudulent. That should have scared them. Instead, it made them arrogant. Dorinda started working the neighborhood. Facebook posts, whisper campaigns, phone trees, all that suburban warfare dressed up as civic concern. Suddenly, I was the difficult rancher trying to take away the community pool from innocent children. Never mind that the pool sat on my land. Never mind that the permit was garbage. Never mind that they'd billed me for the privilege of being robbed. She ran a community poll asking whether the pool should remain open for families. 93% voted yes. Well, congratulations, theft was popular. Then she called the county and hinted that maybe my cattle operation violated noise and odor rules. The officer who showed up, Dale Strunk, walked the property, looked everything over, and wrote in his report that I was in full compliance. Before he left, he leaned against his truck and said, "Calls like this usually tell me more about the caller than the property." That one made me smile. But the real turn came in discovery. Vera started pulling records, board minutes, emails, permit files, anything with a date and a signature. Buried in those records was an email from Dorinda to the HOA surveyor 6 weeks before the permit was filed. Vera read it to me over the phone, slow and careful. "We need that southeast corner included. If we pull the pins and restake it, the drainage argument should hold." Pull the pins. My grandfather's pins. The iron markers driven into that earth decades before Dorinda ever sprayed hairspray into the Texas atmosphere. Somebody had physically yanked them from the ground to fake a new boundary. That was the moment the whole story changed in my mind. Up to then, I'd thought I was dealing with an HOA drunk on authority. After that, I understood I was dealing with deliberate fraud. And then came the twist that turned ugly into rotten. A former board member named Carol Finn Quietwoman, former county clerk, resigned months earlier, agreed to meet with Vera and me. She sat us down at her scarred kitchen table, slid over a manila folder, and said, "I've been waiting for somebody with standing to sue." Inside was everything. A secretly recorded amendment expanding HOA authority without a proper membership vote. The very amendment Dorinda's lawyer had been using against me. It was void, all of it. Then Carol handed over one more document, a purchase agreement tied to a holding company called Calera Acquisitions. The deal allowed the aquatic center to be bought at below market value once construction was complete and operational. Registered agent for the company, Dorinda Yancey. That room got real quiet. She hadn't just stolen land. She hadn't just bullied a rancher. She'd used HOA dues, forged authority, manipulated boundaries, and built herself a path to quietly own the finished asset on the cheap. The residents thought they were funding a pool for their families. She was building herself a discounted business. At that point, my case stopped being a property dispute and became what it really was, greed in a blazer. From there, things moved fast. Vera filed the quiet title action. The DA's office got a formal criminal referral. A reporter named Stevie Brandt started pulling public records and wrote the story Dorinda deserved instead of the one she pitched. The surveyor flipped when investigators showed him the email, the PIN, and the phone records. He gave a statement. Carol agreed to testify. 61 HOA homeowners showed up ready to sit in court and watch what their board had done in their name. Dorinda still tried to settle. $25,000 drop all claims, no cooperation with criminal investigators. She sent a polished consultant to my porch with the offer. I listened. Then I said, tell them no. No counter, no drama, just no. The hearing happened on a Tuesday morning in late April. Courtroom packed. Dorinda in a burgundy blazer, glasses on a beaded chain, trying to look like a woman unfairly inconvenienced by the truth. Vera laid it all out, the deed chain, the 1962 survey, the void permit, the fake amendment, the email about pulling the pins, the testimony, the fraud. The judge ruled from the bench at 12:17 p.m. The HOA had no valid easement. The permit was void. The amendment was void. I held clear title to that southeastern parcel, including all improvements thereon, including the pool. The gallery didn't cheer. It exhaled. 61 people letting go of 11 months of tension all at once, like wind passing through dry grass. By 2 that afternoon, Cliff Drowski had his yellow pump truck backed up to the pool deck. There's a deeply satisfying sound a pump makes when justice gets practical. It starts with a hard gulp at the drains, then settles into a relentless mechanical thrum as 21,000 gallons start leaving a place they never belonged. The chlorine smell faded as the water dropped. Wet concrete, limestone, and mud rose up underneath. Residents stood there watching. So did Stevie with her camera. Dorinda was nowhere in sight. 5 hours later, the bottom of the pool lay bare, a giant, expensive, empty shell on my ranch land. The next morning, Cliff and I bolted a commercial livestock waterer into the shallow end, plumbed it to my well, and strung a single low electric line along the coping. Then I opened the gate and walked 6 Herefords in. They didn't hesitate. They stepped down, lowered their heads, and drank like that pool had always been exactly what it should have been useful. That photograph ran everywhere. A couple weeks later, Dorinda got removed from the board in a landslide vote. Criminal charges followed. The developer's reputation collapsed. The surveyor lost his license. The HOA got audited. Money got clawed back. A scholarship fund got created out of the recovered mess. And the pool, it's still there technically. Concrete shell, pergola, shade, cattle trough in the shallow end. My grandfather's initials are stamped into a band of concrete nearby. Boot prints, hoof prints, a quiet little record of who the land belongs to and who finally got the last word. And somewhere in all this I learned something I wish more people understood sooner. Power loves people who scare easy. It feeds on confusion, on paperwork, on the hope that you'll feel too small or too tired to push back. But paper cuts both ways. And sometimes the difference between being robbed and being vindicated is whether you stay calm long enough to read what's really in front of you. Dorinda had money, a lawyer, a board, a Facebook crowd, and a polished story. I had an old deed, some county records, and the patience not to panic. That was enough. So now I want to ask you something. When somebody in authority lies, manipulates the rules, and hides behind community, good, how far should a person be allowed to go to make things right? Should they just recover what was stolen? Or is a little public humiliation part of justice too? Tell me what you think in the comments, who was right, who was wrong, and what you would have done in my place. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a property grab, or some petty tyrant with a clipboard and too much confidence, share your story too. I promise you, some of those are even crazier than mine.